So as Greg said, this is Lessons Learned, assessment projects for distance and online students. I am Sam Harlow. I'm the online learning librarian at UNC Greensboro. I also wanted to say that I was an instructional technology consultant before I had this job. And I also teach 2 online courses, one for an undergraduate program and one for our LIS program here. So I feel like I have experience with all those different things. So hopefully I can kind of talk about assessment like this from all those different lenses. So if you want to follow along, this is the presentation, and you can keep it later. And I think Emery is going to put them all online, but sometimes I find that people like to kind of follow along. And just at the beginning here to get started, I want to do a quick poll, which I will also throw in the chat. So if you just have a second, I don't know. That worked. Let me know if it didn't. Are people able to access that poll?
Yeah, if you open up, if you click the chat tool at the bottom, she posted a big long URL there. And if you click on that link, it will open a new window in your default browser.
Just take a second.
It may it may open behind your Zoom window if Zoom has primacy, or if you've full screened your Zoom window, you might not see it. So you may need to go out of full screen. But if you click that link, it will open a new window in your default browser, and you should be able to fill out her Google form.
And if it doesn't work, people can just throw these questions on a chat. I'm just kind of trying to get a idea of if you've done assessment before, if you've done assessment with online students and instructors, or you know, where you guys are coming from and what you'd like to learn from this session. So I'll give it a couple more minutes and then we'll get going. So as they're coming in, okay, great. Cool. Someone is here from UNCG. Hey. Oh, Susie. Hey, Susie. Yeah. Good. So we have a good mix so far of instructional design, faculty, distance education, librarians, both. So good. A lot of you have done assessment projects, and a lot of you do them with online instructors. So great. At the end, we can all share what we're doing and learn from each other. So some of you are new to it and want to learn more about it. By assessment project, we're going to talk about how I define that. For this presentation, we're really talking about assessment of programs, not assessment in terms of grades. So we're talking about like qualitative, quantitative, mixed methods assessment, like surveys, focus groups, interviews, looking at data from your LMS, all that kind of stuff. So hybrid versus fully online issues, great. Better assessment techniques, good free tools, great. How to engage learners more efficiently in assessments. What degree should faculty be involved? Great. Okay, so I think that kind of gives me enough to get started and to think about where we're all coming from. Cool. Okay, so back to the presentation. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is why assessment. So why does assessment matter? So before I get started, someone said they can't see my presentation. Is that just because I was in the form? Can everyone see this slide that says why assessment? Okay, cool. So to get started on that, this is a quote from an article about assessment, but assessment is important because it shows you strategies that you can use, right? So again, what I mean by assessment for this presentation is assessment of programs. So sending out a survey, sending out, leading a focus group, analyzing something that goes on online, looking at numbers from things. Again, kind of this programmatic assessment. I don't mean assessment in terms of evaluation like grades. That could be a whole nother presentation, so that's great. But that's what we're going to talk about for this one. So for here at our library, assessment is kind of a big deal. We have a lot of things in terms of assessment. So using our assessment data to improve programs, buy into online learning, looking at funding to increase our budget, and creating new positions and more. So the more you know about your programs, like looking at your online programs, your online students, and even other things that you could assess, the more you can not only improve things, but you can get more things. So that's always useful. So that's really the main reason why we do a lot of assessment in our library. So I didn't know where everyone was at in terms of levels. So someone said that they were new to it. So I'll quickly kind of go about this. But there's typically qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods. So sometimes, you'll hear faculty and people, really be pro-quantitative because it can be much easier to like make graphs and stuff from the numbers. Whereas qualitative is typically like interviews, focus groups, things like that, like looking at transcripts and breaking down them based on codes or things like that. So that can be harder and a lot more time consuming typically. And there's also a mixed method, so kind of using both. So the projects I'm going to talk about are kind of going to dip into all three of these, but qualitative data, quantitative data, and then of course we mix the two. So this is just a basic idea of the plan of assessment, so it's the basic idea of that plan, execute, analyze. So when you first start an assessment plan, if you're at a higher education, the big thing you're going to think about is how are you going to do it? Who are your partners? And then also IRB, the Institutional Review Board. If you've never done IRB before, you need to, any kind of assessment project where you're getting data from students, even if it's not health data, it needs to run through your institution's IRB, Institutional Review Board. And typically, like at our institution, you have to go through training. Like we have a set of modules that we all have to go through. So it can be kind of time consuming. So again, I'm saying this because it's July 20th. This summer can be a great time to just go ahead and knock that out. And then once you do it, typically it's good for about 5 or so years. So if assessment is something you're interested in kind of dipping your feet into, I would recommend just going ahead and getting out of the way. But when you put in your IRB for anything, you do need to know exactly what questions you're going to ask. If it's a focus group, exactly what questions are going to be on your surveys. Are you going to have incentives? So you have to have the whole thing planned out when you submit it to the IRB. If you're not asking your students health-related questions or personal identifying information, the IRB process typically goes pretty quickly. So of course, then you execute it, like that's running the assessment. So running the survey, using different things like facilitators for focus groups, taking notes, staying organized. This is where a lot of cloud-based tools that are free can be really useful to stay organized. Of course, there's like Google Docs, Google Apps to run notes and things like that. But here we have something called Box, which is another cloud storage system that's actually more secure than Google Apps. So that can be good for data, especially data that includes names and any kind of sensitive information, because it's a little bit easier to run that. And a part of your plan, if you're collecting any kind of data that has sensitive information, is that you have to have a data plan as well. So then of course the last part is analyzing it. That's creating the charts, writing the reports, which of course can be like writing a paper to be published somewhere, but also it's reports for your administrators, for your higher ups, for your bosses to prove, what you need, like these new positions, more funding, things like that. And then also you and hopefully have goals for your assessment projects where you can develop a plan of action for your lessons learned. And of course I have this in this big, bright thing here where it's important in all these parts, 1, 2, 3, to get feedback from your colleagues. So for people to always ask, how would you do this? We're lucky at UNCG that we have a lot of different assessment departments, which again, most higher education places do because of accreditation factors like SACS. So we work a lot with our educational research methodology department that runs a department called ORS. The library pays them money to come in and do workshops on us, on facilitating things, helps us design surveys and things like that. So we're lucky to have that at our library. And if you don't have that, it's just where making connections and making friends, people is always great. So, you know, knowing people around assessment is important, like I just mentioned. So at UNCG Libraries, we have an assessment team, and we have a LibGuide, which of course librarians are pretty familiar with, but they're just guides, online guides that help us keep things organized, you know, like little mini websites. But we have a guide where we show all of our assessment reports, and then we can always look to that and be like, oh, what's been done typically, you know, recently with student learning, institutional effectiveness, things like that. So now we're going to go into why am I talking about assessing online students and online instructors. So knowing the demographics of your institution. So at UNCG, from a report I got from the two links there at the bottom, UNCG Online and UNCG Reports, we have around 1,800 online students, and that's students enrolled in fully online programs, with an increase of around 800 students in the last 4 years. So we have over 8,000 students enrolled in online classes, so that includes face-to-face and online students. So that's up over 7,000 in the last 4 years. And we have 23 online programs, with most of them being master's level or higher. So those are all good things to keep in mind. And a lot of those numbers show me that online learning at UNCG is growing, and it's something that UNCG is willing to invest in. So therefore, it's definitely important to assess that as on its own. So online students a lot of times are non-traditional students. What I mean by that are, you know, a lot of times we'll think of students as 18 to 22-year-olds, but online students can be that, of course, but a lot of times they're adult learners coming back after a long break. They have families, they have full-time jobs, they can be veterans, they can be transfer students coming in from other places. So a lot of these things are usually lumped into a category called non-traditional students. So that's important to keep in mind. It also means that they're great to be assessed because they can show us how we can help improve our services to all non-traditional students, which is a big population here at UNCG as a public university of our size. So distance students can also feel isolated. So it's important to include them not only in program and teaching, that's talked about a lot, but also in our assessment. Sometimes I think they can be forgotten about because they're not here to do the focus groups or to study in the classes and things like that. So it's important to keep them in mind when you're designing your assessments as well. So in the libraries, in higher education libraries, we have a program called ACRL, which is for academic libraries. And they have a thing called the ACRL Distance Learning Standards, which is pretty much about providing equal services and resources to distance students from the library. So I mentioned this because I know not all of you are librarians, but a lot of different places have different standards for different things. So, and they even particularly talk about assessment. So they say, you know, the distance learning community must always be represented in the planning and assessment activities of the library. So that means it's important that we always include them. So those are all great reasons to include them. So now that we've kind of done the intro to just assessment and what I'm talking about with assessment and why I think and why our library thinks assessment is really important, I'm going to talk about 3 different projects that we did in the library that focused on online students and online services and resources for our students and online instructors. So the first one I'm going to talk about is a chat assessment project I did on our virtual chat services of our nursing students. So what we did was we took chat transcripts. So in the library, we have a virtual chat service called Library Help, which means that students can go to our websites and use our chat service and chat us questions about research and anything like that. It's open until midnight most nights. And it's a hugely used service by all students at UNCG, but particularly we try to push it to our students taking online courses, distance students, and online instructors, because it's a way they can quickly get help, you know, through this chat service instead of having to email us back and forth or to call or to try to figure things out that way. So what we did was the health science librarian and I decided to look at nursing student chats. Because nursing students at UNCG are, again, a lot of these things that we were talking about. A lot of times they're non-traditional online students. The nursing degree here has a lot of online programs. So we know that a lot of the nursing people chatting in are on campus and are taking a lot of online courses. They also are, a lot of them, nurses in the field. So a lot of them are coming back after having been gone from school for a while. So we thought it was a great population of students to focus on. So what we did is we pulled 67 transcripts from these nursing students, and we found these transcripts by doing keyword searching on, you know, nursing keywords that they would use in the chat. So like nursing databases, things like that. We pulled down the 67 chats and then we anonymized them, put them up in Box, our secure cloud service, and then we coded the transcripts using themes and keywords. So coding is something that we did have to, you know, when I was in library school, I was not trained on any of this, but I did go to a workshop through ORS, that institution I was talking about, on coding. So there's two different ways to do coding typically. You can highlight, pulling down transcripts, finding themes, keyword themes, and you can usually highlight them with a highlighter, or you can use a digital coding tool like Atlas TI, which that's what we use, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So like I said, we worked with the health science librarian. We got this Atlas TI training in order to analyze the chats, and we consulted with our basically chat librarian, the one who runs all of it, to make sure we were pulling the transcripts right, doing all that stuff. So these are the tools we use. So we used Excel. We pulled the chat transcripts down into a CSV file, you know, converted that into Excel file, and then we could do keyword searching, you know, just through a control find. So the kind of keywords we used were, you know, our nursing librarian's name, the nursing code for courses, which is NUR, and then that also pulled anyone talking about nursing in general, hospitals, you know, people asking about hospital care, things like that. One of our big nursing databases is CINAHL and PubMed. So those are the kind of keywords we looked for. And through this method, just from the fall of 2016, we found 67 chats. And I think that, and that's only from 3 months from 2016. So we wanted to do this to improve our chat services to nursing students, but also, again, to online students, because many of our nursing students are online, and again, non-traditional students. And we wanted to create an FAQ tip sheet for interns, library interns, and librarians, new librarians, and, you know, librarians who have been here a while, to help us deal with health science chats. Here in the library, a lot of times health science questions can cause a lot of anxiety, because most of us librarians did not come from a health science background. So when they ask us questions, especially our interns, we pull interns from our grad LIS program, you know, future librarians. A lot of them kind of shut down and don't know what to do. So we want to improve that service and help nurses, because a lot of times they do chat in when our nursing librarian isn't here. So here's a couple of charts just from the basic analysis. This is a still in progress project. We're in the midst of coding. We're almost done, and we're about to start writing the report. But you can see here that we got some good numbers just from pulling down the transcripts and coding them based on these things. So, you know, we pulled them from August, September, and November, and you can see the breakdown of when they happened. We use something called a read scale to classify our chats, which is basically to show us the level of reference question we get. So like really easy questions, just like, where is the bathroom? Or stuff like that, it would be a 1. And then 5 and above, I think we do have a 6, are from really high level reference questions. So you can see here, most of them fell into this 3 category. And then you can see here, we thought maybe a lot of them would be coming in at night, but actually most of the nursing chats were coming in the afternoon. So that's good for us to know as well. Excuse me. So this project is still in progress, but we have learned some things, and we're going to learn more as we do this. But chats are mostly reference-based. They're not just quick little questions. They're questions that kind of take more of our time and are typically about our library databases, research, assignments, things like that. And most of them are coming from off campus, where the students did reference not being on campus. That doesn't mean necessarily that they're a fully distant student, but many times, of course, if they're using chat, they're not in the library, which is good. So most chats are coming from the library homepage, which is good for us to know in terms of how we market that, at where we put that link. And then the second is coming from the catalog. What that does show us is that many of the chats aren't coming from the nursing guide that we really want students to go to as a starting point, to look at databases, to get started on the research process and things like that. So that shows us that we really need to work on where we place those guides, as well as how we market those guides and that thing. and that kind of thing. So there is, of course, in these chats, a lot of confusion about resources. So, you know, a lot of them don't understand the differences between our different resources. They don't understand the differences, how you would access things off campus. We use things called libproxies that they have to go to. So that can be challenging. But like an example from one of the chats is that a student was using Dynamed Plus, which is kind of like a Wikipedia for health resources. It's just a quick encyclopedia entries about health. They were using that to try to find scholarly articles, and they had been doing that for a while and getting frustrated. But, you know, they just were stuck on using Dynamed Plus. So that shows that students, you know, they kind of pick a link on our guides and they go with it because they think it's health oriented, but they don't really know the differences between something like Dynamed Plus, CINAHL, one of our major databases where you can find scholarly articles and that thing. So it means that, you know, we need to think about how we're going to pull back and start at the beginning with our nurses student, including the chat. So librarians are busy, which make it really hard for detailed virtual chats. So this proves the need that we're making this FAQ and doing this training, because there were a lot of chats where librarians didn't respond right away, they got cut off, and even some occasions where they gave them the wrong answers. So that just shows the need that we need to back up and make sure our librarians are equipped to deal with students, because we don't want to lead them down the wrong track with these chats. So future directions is that we're hoping that other library liaisons and even other people on campus can use this method to learn more about their departments. We get a lot of questions about the Writing Center, about advising, things like that. So we're hoping that this could even lead to a partnership where other institutions on campus could learn from these kind of assessments. And then we could also move this method to learn more about e-resources, you know, like ebooks, things like that, and how our students are using them. And then we use something called LibAnalytics to track our chats. So what we found is that people aren't using them, and we're not really using them to get good analysis, and there's an issue with consistency. So we're going to look at how we do this as librarians. So we're going to look at how we use the chat in general, which is useful information. So the next question the next project I'm going to do is talking about survey to online students and instructors. So I'm sure a lot of you have sent out surveys. They're super easy to make, easy to send out. So I do want to talk about that this survey we made wasn't just, you know, sent out to all students at UNCG. They were sent out to just online students and instructors. So they were sent out to all students taking an online course, which that includes face-to-face and distance students, and all instructors teaching an online course, which again includes face-to-face and adjuncts, you know, instructors who might not even be in Greensboro, North Carolina. So there are about library resources and services, and they were about library resources and services. So we analyzed this using Qualtrics, you know, what we use to make the survey, and Atlas TI, again, what we use for that chat to code the comments. So what we did here is that we did the, it was a project between the e-resources librarian, registrar's office, where they pulled the emails. Again, that ORS, that they helped us design the questions and the methodology. They came up with the methodology of coding the comments. So here you can see that we did an email campaign where that's how we sent out the survey for students to fill out. And we also offered $25 gift cards to Barnes & Nobles to 8 people who took the two different surveys, one to instructors, one to students. 4 for the students and 4 for instructors. And that made it so that we had a lot higher participation rate than we had in the past. So that's really good. And we were worried we might have some people who just clicked through and left everything blank in order to put their name in for the gift card, but we didn't have almost any of that. So we found that these incentives were really, really useful, and we're going to continue to try to use them in the future. So of course, Qualtrics, and again, Atlas TI, which I'm going to show you a little bit how that works here in a second. So we wanted to improve our online services and resources, and also to improve our marketing strategies and methods to students in online courses and teachers teaching online. So here's a couple of comments we got. One thing we also did with this survey is that Qualtrics makes it really easy for us to analyze how they fill things out, like what e-resources they use, what they don't use. Of course, this isn't shocking, but we found that a lot of them use Google, and they don't see why they should use the library, which is totally fine, and it just helps us know that. But we wanted to look at the comments, the open-ended comments in this survey in a little more detail than we normally do with surveys. So again, a lot of the comments were really positive. This is just an example of some of the positive stuff we got. They were overwhelmingly positive, which is great. We're always really happy to have that happen. But we did find that a lot of people did not know about our stuff through the comments. So again, you can see here with these coding, we could kind of see specific suggestions they made, because a lot of the comments were, I wish I had known about this in the beginning. So we were able to see that like a lot of them wanted us to include this material in orientation. So this gives us, you know, data right here that we can push more to create orientations and to get included in more orientations on campus. So this is, you know, made us have the idea that we're going to do online virtual orientations for undergraduates, graduates, and instructors in August. And then we're going to run another series for undergraduates because they get here, you know, right when school starts in September. And we're going to see how that goes. So here is an example of how we did the coding. We broke it down into these groups right here: usability, resources, population, space, services, all this stuff. So feelings and emotions were really high because a lot of the comments were, you guys are doing great, thanks. Like, I'm really happy with the library, thanks. So that's why that's really high. But it is useful to see that a lot of them in the comments did mention specific library resources and services, which is great. A lot of them did mention barriers to access, so like why they couldn't access our stuff. That's good because we can break that down more. And then usability. So using something like Atlas TI or coding your comments using highlighting, however you want to do it. Highlighting's free, and some people really like the tactile approach of just printing out the comments and highlighting all the comments, you know, color coding it based on different groups. You know, for me, I liked using Atlas TI, which UNCG does give us for free, because I had digital copies where I could make nice little graphs like this. So here's the graph from the barriers to access comments. And again, this just shows us that a lot of students just don't know about our stuff, which though, you know, we need to work on that. That's good because it means that, you know, it's not that the stuff doesn't work all the time, though that does happen here, but that, you know, they just don't know about our stuff. So, you know, we're going to work on that moving forward. There were a good amount of comments of access to materials, a lot of complaints about our ebooks, licenses, cost of textbooks, things like that, which again shows us and gives us more ammunition to promote free resources to our students through our initiatives of open education resources and things like that. So the lessons we learned from this, beyond what I kind of just talked about, is that a lot of students and instructors want things in Canvas. They don't want to be constantly leaving Canvas. So we already have a library role in our LMS, or, you know, I think you guys use at App State As You Learn. We use Canvas, so we're working on getting more, we already have a librarian role where we can be a librarian in a course, but we're gonna work on integrating our guides on the left-hand side of Canvas courses and having that be a more seamless integration through an LTI. Of course, you know, as I mentioned throughout this, we're gonna improve our marketing and outreach to online instructors and students. You know, if they don't know about us, then that's a problem. So we're working with our marketing person, we're working across campus with different partners and advising orientations to get us out there better with instructors and students. You know, I think a lot of times instructors are the ones telling students about things, so that kind of thing. And then of course, you know, convincing instructors and students of the library services over Google, which again, that means, you know, for me and lessons I learned from this is, you know, we don't want to bash Google in our instruction. We want to show them how if they use our stuff, it can be easier than Google in these ways. So we're going to work on that. And then OER materials are open education resources. We already do a lot of programs with that, but we're going to do more because a lot of students did complain about the cost of textbooks. So keep it going there. So future directions are, of course, doing more focused surveys to online instructors and students. So this was about a pretty broad set of services. So we might want to do some in the future focusing in on just one thing, like maybe our instruction, maybe our LibGuides, things like that. But also kind of doing things beyond surveys. So I don't have time to talk about this in this presentation, but we do have a project going on in the fall and the spring where we'll be doing advisory boards, DE student advisory boards. So we'll be pulling distant students, ideally from undergrad and grad, and having them meet virtually in our virtual meeting tool WebEx, and we're going to record it, and then we'll assess that. And we have people working on this project from the library, from advising, from student resources, from program directors of online programs, from our UTLC. And we're gonna be asking the students in these groups at least one question about each of those areas. So like our Canvas admin will be in the group. She can ask questions about Canvas and how they feel about Canvas. The library, of course, will ask questions about the library and how we can better serve them. And ideally, this will get us, you know, more specific answers in terms of answering our questions. So that leads into the idea of focus groups. We want to do more focus groups, things like this, getting people into virtual rooms and talking to them. So that includes our adjunct instructors that aren't in Greensboro teaching online courses, as well as our usability studies. And doing more usability studies, which I'm going to talk about next. So, and Greg talked about OER resources. That's great. He dropped some great links in there. So definitely check those out. So this is the last part, and people can start, if they have any questions that they don't want to forget, you can start putting them in the chat about those first two projects as I slowly move on to the last assessment project that I'm going to talk about, where we did usability testing of library database page and our LibGuides. So what did we do? We decided that we wanted to record students using our online resources, our library homepage, our databases, and our LibGuides, which are these guides that we give to people about library resources websites, you know, to have the video for us to go through and analyze later. So what we did was we camped out in the lobby of our school, and we just had, again, these gift cards, $10 gift cards to the Barnes & Nobles. And if you were willing to spend 10 minutes with us and go through a series of about 5 tasks, we gave you the gift card, and we got a recording of these students using our stuff and talking through using our stuff, which was really great. So of course, this is a presentation about online and instructors and students. So we did do this with 2 online students. I wish I could have gotten more, but a lot of our online programs here are asynchronous, so they're not required to use our virtual meeting tool, which we use WebEx, which is similar to Zoom. So I think a lot of them felt intimidated by that. They didn't have time. So moving forward, I'm going to work on definitely just maybe only doing it with online students, or including them more and finding ways to get them more involved. But we did do 2 online students in this study. So this was a project between these people. And the tools that we used were WebEx, which again is just like Zoom, not just like, but very similar to Zoom, where we are now to record online students. We used Camtasia, which is a screen recording software to record what our face-to-face students were doing in the lobby. And we had a laptop and a Snowball microphone, which worked pretty well, even in a lobby that was pretty crowded. We just made sure they spoke into it, and it worked great. And then again, those gift cards, we had $10 gift cards that we handed out to everyone who did it. So again, those incentives, there was a line for people to do this in the lobby because people wanted those gift cards. And just to clarify, our Barnes & Nobles is where our coffee shop is. So people really were into that because we were just basically like, you get a $10 gift card to the Starbucks. So they were really into it. And then again, of course, you know, Google Apps for our notes and collaboration. So here's a sample of how we kind of broke it down. So over here is our participants. You can see their major. We did ask them their major. We asked them how much library instruction they got. So you can see here, a lot of them did get instruction. And then twice a week. So this is how much they use the library website. So just going there and doing anything. So you can see it varies. Some of them were saying twice a week. Some of them were saying once a month. Some of them were saying once total. You can see here they had different majors as well. So it was really useful. We also had them, so part of this was looking at our database homepage. So that's where it's a page on our website where you can go to access all of our library databases. And it's important to go through there because that's how we proxy things for off-campus students. But we know it's pretty out of date and it's not very user friendly. So we wanted to show them 3 different database interfaces. Our eResource librarian found these where we took off the logo to try to you know, eliminate bias, but we showed them these 3 different things that were similar and different to the ones we had. And then we picked the one that they liked the best. You know, that's how we numbered them, 1, 2, 3, and we handed them this in a sheet of paper. And for the online students, we had them, you know, look at these on a PDF. So they overwhelmingly preferred number 3, which isn't surprising because it's broken down by subject. And that will, again, it will help us lead us to do more of that. And you can see here, most of them had library instruction, which we weren't really expecting. So again, this is still an ongoing project, but you can get these numbers pretty easily. So the big thing we found is that the online and face-to-face students have no idea the differences between any of our stuff. They think it all works the same, and they want it to all work just like Google. And when it didn't look like work just like Google, they got pretty frustrated. And this can be useful data for you guys too, if you're instructional technologists, or, you know, instructors or things. Students, you know, they really want things to work like Google. So that came up as well. And they don't know the differences between our stuff, like why should they use the catalog versus the databases? And what are the differences between the two? And then a lot of them didn't know that their guides exist, which again, we found in other assessment as well. And then a lot of them also, you know, did not like our database interface, which again, this gives us good ammunition to change it. So students also don't like to dig into resources. When they didn't see something like right there on the home page that was easy to click into, they got frustrated and kind of were like, whatever, this doesn't work the way I want it to. And then students also prefer, they wanted things broken down by subjects and by their majors. Like all of them really, we did our tasks based on their majors, and when they couldn't find things just based on what they needed for their assignments, they got, again, kind of frustrated. So students were really successful at using our LibGuides once they found them, and they definitely wanted a finding articles tab at the top to make it easier to find articles for assignments. And a lot of them didn't remember their library instruction sessions at all. Like they were like, I have one, but I don't remember anything about it. So that's useful data. I mean, you know, it's kind of a bummer, but also, again, it helps us think about how can we engage our students in our instruction sessions to have them remember us. So, yeah. So future directions are to do more authentic assessment. So I did link on here to this authentic assessment page. What is it? So it's really just a form of assessment in which students are asked to perform real-world tasks that demonstrate meaningful application of essential knowledge and skills. So what John Mueller is talking about is actually really thinking about this in terms of how you grade students. But of course, this is really important for us in libraries because we don't want them to just think of us as something that, you know, they're never going to use unless they need us at the last minute for a citation. We want them to think about how they're going to use us in their life and how they're using the skills we're going to teach them in their life. So we want to do more assessment that's kind of based on that. We want to continue with these UX studies and other online resources. We want to do more of these, but more focused on like one online resource. For this first one, we did a lot of different things. So we want to kind of maybe, again, just focus on our library tutorials or things like that. And I talked about this, but I want to work on getting more undergrad distance students to participate and get them past feeling intimidated by our virtual meeting tool so that we could have more of these one-on-one conversations for me to learn from them in terms of our assessments. So now that I've done all these different projects, assessing online instructors and students, these are some of the takeaways I've kind of taken from the 3 different projects. So you need to think about how you're going to communicate your assessment. Like, how are you going to recruit people? Is it incentives, which leads into the next thing? Is it through email? Mass emailing at UNCG is kind of tricky. So I don't know how it works at your institutions, but, you know about that. Talk to the people who could help you with that. We ended up using a tool that, we wouldn't get a lot of bounce backs. They wouldn't be able to write back to us right away and that kind of thing. Think about your partners across campus. Like, nothing should be done alone. And also, like, that all of our assessment projects included people outside of the library. And moving forward, I want to do more of that. I showed you in the demographics that online learning is growing at UNCG, and I'm guessing at all of your institutions as well. That's part of the reason why we're all here. So there's a lot of departments that, you know, don't have time for assessment. So if you have time for assessment and you're interested in assessment, and you can reach out to these departments and say, you know, I'll share my assessment, and moving forward, let's try something together. So what I'm trying to do, and what, you know, great partners are advising, you know, registrar's office, our assessment, you know, that deals with SACS accreditations. They have great tools and techniques, and they're interested in learning about this too. UNCG Online, who works with a lot of our online programs, our instructional technologists, and instructors who are working in online programs, and program leaders. Those are just some of people who I'm trying to work with to do assessments. Because again, I mean, online students are busy. We're all busy. So if you can hit people, you know, with more questions than just about the library, if you're going to ask them about how they feel about their learning management system and the library, that's going to be a better use of their time and your time in the end. So that kind of leads into thinking outside of the box. So, you know, don't just think about, I mean, I showed you guys a survey, and surveys are great, but, you know, think about things you can do beyond surveys, and where are you going to go past a survey, right? Like, can you try to pull names and then follow up with some people and that kind of thing? And then setting a timeline and thinking about how you'll share your results is useful. You know, assessment projects can go on and on and on. And, you know, that's something we're struggling with. You know, you just need to be able to get the results quickly to the right people. And by that, it's not just about sharing it with other librarians, but also, you know, your boss, their boss, deans, provosts, and trying to show them, look, you know, we have this data, and here's some ways that from this data we can help people. So this is just some follow-up stuff, some reminders, some questions to ask yourself if you're thinking about getting started in assessment. And that's it. So I see at the top there's been some good, people are starting to talk. So definitely this is the time where you guys can ask me questions. And I saw from there that a lot of you guys are doing assessment as well. So this would be a great time to share. If you're doing assessment projects with online instructors and students, let us know in the chat, or you can turn your microphone on. I think I can turn it on for you. I'm going to share the slides again as people are asking that. Yeah, so just throw in your questions or turn your microphone on.
Yeah, this is Greg again. You can just click on your mic at the bottom left to unmute yourself if you have a question, and we can go from there. We have about 15 minutes.
I'm gonna get the slide link for you guys while you're thinking of your questions. Or again, like I said, I would love to hear from you guys. I don't think I'm an expert on assessment. So if you guys want to share your experiences with assessment as well, I would love to hear it and get ideas.
Great. So Sam posted the link to her slide stack there in the chat. So there were a few folks wondering where they could get to those slides, and you can find the links there in the chat.
And are you guys doing any assessment or want to share or have any questions? Yeah. You're welcome to email me too.
Yeah, Sam, I would just say we have a person here in one of the e-learning library team who's sort of spearheading the open textbook initiative stuff for us. And I mentioned before, I teach music theory as my other job, and I'm doing some fully online stuff, and I know it's this is sort of a tangent, but I've been really impressed with what's available. Music texts, I guess like every text, are just crazy expensive. And I've been doing sort of a remedial theory course for incoming students who struggled on our theory placement exam. And it's been really great to not have to ring those people up for, you know, $130 for something they're going to take a course which is essentially for no credit, just to get, you know, to be at the place where they can take a 4-credit music theory course. So I highly commend those, recommending to faculty who might find those useful, those open textbook resources.
Yeah. Yeah, I just threw in there on the chat our OER guide. I work really closely with Beth Bernhardt, who she's head of our collections. And we do these things called OER mini grants, where we offer faculty $1,000 if they're willing to kind of drop a textbook, ideally for OER materials, but if anything they can do to save the students money. And then that's, again, great in terms of assessment, because then we can go to the provost and be like, look, because of our 15 stipends, because you spent $15,000 handing faculty $1,000 each, we ended up saving students, $100,000 with textbooks. So again, it kind of takes those kind of incentives to get things going. But we find that once faculty do it, once they switch away from textbooks, they don't usually go back. So yeah, someone asked me if they're interested in learning. Yep, you're welcome to contact me. Excuse me. We've been running these for years now, so I'm happy to share with you and CC Beth on the email that you send me on that. So,
yeah, there's another comment there about marketing. Sounds like we struggle with that too. We realized there's a comment there that said we realized we weren't getting distance ed students.
Yeah.
And had trouble determining how we'd have them join.
Yeah, and I said the same thing. So this comment says, we did a survey and focus groups last year about how the library supported student success. We realized we weren't getting distant students and had trouble determining how we would have them join us in focus groups, especially since many of them are working during the day and maybe only accessing the LMS at night. So yeah, I mean, from our assessment, we've definitely found out that we need to be in the LMS, because if they're only getting into their LMS at night, we need to be there. We need to have a link to our stuff. So we're looking into an LTI integration with our LMS Canvas that would make our LibGuides automatically appear in the course navigation under something called library resources. So we're working on that. UNC Charlotte's turning it on in the fall. I'm working with a distance librarian at Florida State who has been doing it, I think, for a couple of years now. So that's a big thing. And then another thing I do with my assessments is I try to offer them time to meet at night, because I'm lucky enough that in my position, I could lead a focus group at night or help facilitate one at night, and, get comp time on another time. But it's still hard. And that's why, the more you can think about in the planning process of this, incentives, how are you going to reward students, these online students who might be working jobs, who might, have small kids at home, all these busy things, from the beginning. So again, those gift cards has really helped us, but it's still not perfect. We're trying to still find more ways to get involved. And someone said we've done surveys of distance students and more recently of faculty teaching distance courses. And you presented on that at the DLS conference. I was at the DLS conference too. So great. Yeah. I think someone from UNC Wilmington, I don't know if they're in here, they did a poster about a survey at that. So yeah, Greg says LTI, learning tools interoperability. I can never say that word. So it just means, yeah, like you said, it's basically a way to connect apps to your LMS. So like, a way to connect our LibGuide system, SpringShare, more seamlessly into our LMS. So we're definitely working on that. But a lot of times they cost money. So yeah. Mo, what did you present on at DLS? Was it on assessment? And you're welcome to turn your mic on. Was it on the survey, you said? So was your presentation about how to get distance students to take assessment? I think I remember your poster. It was good. And any of you, if you are e-learning librarians or interested in distance learning in that way, the DLS conference is a distance learning library conference that's really great. It's every 2 years on the off year of ACRL, and it's smaller, so usually there's like less than 200 people there, and it's all focused on e-learning and distance education. This was my first time going this last year, and it was great. if you have money in your budget for that. And I think, I mean, we had some instructional design librarians there, and even if you're an instructional designer, I think it has a lot of really useful stuff. But of course, it does also have a lot of stuff on library stuff as well. Yeah. Great. Yeah, Mo, that sounds really great. I think I remember your poster. Didn't you win? I think you won. You're probably just being modest, but yeah, I think she won the poster session. So you guys should look it up.
Yeah, and I would just say if she has a digital copy of it posted somewhere,
send it in.
Post the link in the chat, and all of a sudden you'll be getting a lot of traffic.
Yeah, she did win. There you go.
Blush.
Yeah. Are there any other questions or comments or, like I said, ideas of assessment, like what you guys are doing at your institutions? One thing I didn't talk about that we're going to work on again this year is the learning management system is, of course, a great ground to get assessment from. And that's more quantitative data, right? So like if you run a library module or a folder, what kind of data can you pull from that? And if you have library tutorials on a LibGuide, what kind of data can you pull from that? So that's another thing of assessment, that these are more like assessment projects where you go out and create an assessment and send it out, or organize it like these focus groups and surveys. But of course, great assessment is just looking at the data that's already out there. So what story can your LMS tell you? And what story can your LibGuides tell you? What story can your website tell you? Google Analytics is free and pretty easy to use. And it tells you where people are coming from, how quickly they leave your site, what they're clicking on, and anything with a URL can have Google Analytics put on it, like a LibGuide or anything like that. So keep that in mind. I try to put Google Analytics on everything just to get a basic idea of how my stuff is being used. So that's something I didn't really have time to talk about in this presentation, because I want to talk about these, like, again, more planned out projects. But that's always something that's, like kind of a more low hanging fruit when it comes to assessment. Another thing about assessment that I think is, like, be willing to share your assessment. Like, I think a lot of us, if we're tenure track, whether we're instructors, faculty, or librarians, we're like, oh, publish, publish, publish. But I think it's great to write, quick little reports, create a Google slide, things like that can be easily shared out to, again, your stakeholders, other librarians, through emails or whatever, to be like, look, this quick lesson I learned from these things. So that's another thing, is making our assessment more accessible. I think it's a great idea.
Well, Sam, the way you're using Google Analytics with this, that can be your session for next year.
Oh yeah, great. That's true. I love Google Analytics. Okay, well, I think we're getting close to 2, and I'm sure people want to go to the next session. But feel free to email me the OER stuff. I'm happy to talk to you about. It seems like S. Rogers, maybe he or she wants people to email them. And like I said, I love getting emails. And Mo, I'm sure I'll see you at the DLS conferences. I think we're on a committee together, so I'll see you in the virtual world. And Greg, thank you for hosting.
You're very welcome. And I'd like to thank everybody for attending. And if you are heading to a 2:15 session, you can find the link on the shared doc out there. And thanks for coming. And thanks so much, Sam, for submitting a proposal and for presenting for us.